السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم معلم إبراهيم علمنا ومفهم سليمان فهمنا. اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا ورزقا طيبا وعملا متقبلا. So today inshallah we start a new book in the study of fiqh in the madhhab of Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala rahmatan wasi'ah. Imam al-Shafi'i, who died in the year 204 after the Hijrah. He was born in the year 150 and he died in the year 204. He studied with Imam Malik, he memorized the Quran under 10, he memorized the Muwatta of Imam Malik and he read it to Imam Malik himself. Then he continued to his studies and he became a well-known scholar, specifically in hadith, fiqh and usul al-fiqh. He was in Iraq and then he moved to Egypt, and students, Imam al-Muzani and others, after he passed away and in his lifetime, began to collect his fatwa, collect his speech, up until they made a madhhab for him because of the khidmah of the students. And Imam al-Shafi'i, along with the three other main Imams of the madhahib, Imam Malik, Imam Ahmed and Imam Abu Hanifa, the four Imams of the Muslims, they were not the only madhahib that existed in their time. What does madhhab mean? Someone might say. Madhhab means a school of study, if you like. Madhhab here specifically in fiqh is like a curriculum. And so majority of the ummah today, they follow one of the four madhahib. Okay? They were not the only madhahib and schools or curriculums that were studied in the ummah once upon a time. There was the madhhab of Imam al-Awza'i, madhhab of Layth ibn Sa'd, madhhab of Sufyan and others. In fact, they say that Andalus and Maghrib, they used to follow the madhhab of Imam al-Awza'i for many years, up until one of the scholars brought the madhhab of Imam Malik and it overtook. And one of the reasons why these madhahib flourished and they continue to exist, one of the reasons is because of the khidmah that the service the students gave to their teacher. That some of those great scholars, Imam Awza'i and Layth ibn Sa'd and others, their students ضَيَّعُوهُمْ, like some of the scholars said, their students never gave any attention to their work and their speech and the likes, and they never serviced it, so their works was lost. Whereas these Imams, if you look at how many scholars wrote summarization to their works, direct students, how many scholars applied that in their judging system, like the students of Abu Hanifa. Abu Yusuf became a judge and he began to apply everything that he learned from the madhhab of Abu Hanifa, وهكذا, and the other madhahib that exist today. The students played a pivotal role in gathering their works, doing authorships, making poetry from it, and the likes of these affairs, and they share the reward of the Imam's works that continue to be studied throughout the times. Now, inshallah ta'ala, in this Sunday, every Sunday we'll be studying the madhhab of Imam Shafi'i, and we'll be studying an introductory text, a basic text, a text that you begin with in this field and in this madhhab, and it's called Safinat al-Najah. Safina literally means ship, and Najah means salvation. So the ship of salvation, and having knowledge of how to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how to pray, how to perform wudu, what nullifies your wudu, when do you have to make ghusl. Learning that and acting upon it is the way of salvation. That you worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, al-ghaya alladhi khuliqta min ajlihi, the reason that you were created and the main purpose that you were created for. And so inshallah ta'ala, this book, it will be discussing the basics of taharah, purification, salah, and janazah, and then a small introduction into zakah, and that's all the book consists of. Now, the translation that you have in front of you, and even the Arabic copy that I have, it goes up to siyam and hajj. But this is not from the author or the writing of this author. The author's book finishes at the end of Kitab al-Zakah. Then the scholars that came after, some of the explainers of this book, they thought it makes sense to add Kitab al-Siyam, so they added Kitab al-Siyam. And then a third author came and he added Kitab al-Hajj, But throughout time in Somalia, Yemen and other places where they study this text, they stop at Kitab al-Zakah. So we're going to stick to the original inshallah ta'ala and then move on to the next text after that. طيب. I'll read the Arabic, then we'll give a commentary and then we'll continue like that inshallah ta'ala. He says, بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين على أمور الدنيا والدين وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد خاتم النبيين وآله وصحبه أجمعين ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. He begins by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and sending peace and blessings upon the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. فصل, chapter heading, أركان الإسلام خمسة. The pillars of Islam are 5. And then he mentions the 6 pillars of Iman that we all are aware of. Why does the author begin with the 5 pillars of Islam and the 6 pillars of Iman when it is a book of fiqh, of how to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in taharah, salah and the likes of these affairs? Reason being, many of the books of fiqh, especially the mukhtasarat, they begin with a little bit of a ijmal, a generalization of the 5 pillars of Islam, because salah is one of those 5 pillars and the rest of them are too. But more importantly, they begin with a touch of the first pillar of Islam. Something to do with aqidah and la ilaha illallah to complete the 5 pillars. The other 4 pillars, salah is fiqh, zakah is fiqh, siyam is fiqh, hajj is fiqh, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah is not fiqh. This is i'tiqad, aqidah. So to complete these 5 pillars, they begin with something from something that is connected to the first pillar, so that their books encompass something of the 5 pillars of Islam. So he begins by mentioning what the 5 pillars of Islam are, and they are all well known to you. Shahadatu an la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammadan Rasulullah wa iqamu as-salati wa ita'u az-zakati wa sawmu Ramadan wa hajju al-bayti man istata'a ilayhi sabila. The 5 pillars: to testify that none has the right to be worshipped except for Allah and that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, to establish the prayer, to give the zakah, to fast the month of Ramadan, and to make hajj to the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for those that are able. Faslun, chapter heading, Arkanul Imani Sittatun, the pillars of Iman are 6. أن تؤمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله واليوم الآخر وبالقدر خيره وشره من الله تعالى. That you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His angels, His books, His messengers, in the last day, and in the qadr, the good of it, all of it being from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فصل, chapter heading, ومعنى لا إله إلا الله لا معبود بحق في الوجود إلا الله. He says that the meaning of La ilaha illallah is that none has the right to be worshipped in truth, in existence, except for Allah. And this is a correct meaning. Asaba wa ajada wa afad. He mentioned a comprehensive, beautiful, correct meaning of La ilaha illallah, which is that none has the right to be worshipped in truth except for Allah. And those people that give a deficient definition of La ilaha illallah, when they say the meaning of La ilaha illallah is La raziqa illallah, La khaliqa illallah. Those that say the meaning of La ilaha illallah is there is no creator except for Allah, there is no provider except for Allah, then they have given a deficient meaning of La ilaha illallah. That is a part of the meaning, but that's not comprehensive enough. Why? Because those examples that they give is only rububiyyah. It's connected to the thing that all of the kuffar of Quraysh used to already believe in. They believed that there was no creator except for Allah. There was no provider except for Allah. But the place that they had a problem in, which is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with their actions, their salah, their fasting, their love, their hope, their fear, their slaughtering, and they would fall into shirk. And so if you acknowledge only al-rububiyyah, the actions of Allah, and you don't make tawheed in your actions, then you are not giving the full meaning of La ilaha illallah and the reason why the Rusul were sent. So the author here, he mentions the correct definition. He says, فَصْلٌ عَلَامَاتُ الْبُلُوغِ ثَلَاث. Now we go into the book and the fiqh aspect of it. He says, and he begins with the signs of puberty, the signs of a person becoming an adult. Why? Why would he start with this? Normally, they usually begin with water, taharah. Why did he begin with the signs of bulugh? Ahsant. Because these things that we are learning are only obligatory upon you once you have reached the age of puberty. طيب, he says, علامات البلوغ ثلاث تمام 15 سنة في الذكر والأنثى والاحتلام في الذكر والأنثى ل9 سنين والحيض في الأنثى ل9 سنين. He mentions 3 signs and we're going to categorize them to make it easier. The first 2 are for both male and female. The first 2 are for both male and female. Number 1, the completion of 15 lunar years. The completion of 15 lunar years. Completion of 15 lunar years. What do I mean by lunar years? Hijri. Okay, what does that mean then? That is following the moon cycle. Meaning, you being 15-year-old, in accordance to the Gregorian, let's say someone was born the 11th of January 1982. The time that they reached 15 years old, and that calculation is different to a person reaching 15 years old in the lunar cycle, the moon cycle. Why? Because the moon cycle always changes 10 days roughly every year. Why do we have Ramadan? A couple of years ago, it was in July. Then it came to June. Then it came to May. Then it came to April. Why? Why is it moving closer? Because that's how the moon cycle is. We follow the moon cycle. So here when it says the completion of 15 years old, that if a person reaches 15 years old, then they are considered baligh. They are considered, they've reached the age of puberty. 15 years old in accordance to the moon cycle. And that is roughly 14-year-old in the Gregorian is 14 years old and 7 months. 14 and 7 months. 14 years and 7 months. That's a rough estimation. So 14 and a half. When you're 14 and a half, they're actually 15 years old. The second sign for the male and the female is a person having a wet dream. That a person has a wet dream. That a child that has reached the age, and he mentions here specifically 9 years old and above. So a child that has a wet dream from after 9 years old, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15, then they have reached the age of puberty. And that includes, of course, al-ihtilam here, of course, includes the ejaculation. The third sign that he mentions, which is specific for females, is al-haydhu fil untha li 9 sinin. That a woman or that a girl becomes baligha, adult, if she has menstruation from the age of 9 years old, 9 and above. So from 9 and above, and they have menstruation, then this is a sign that they've reached adulthood. So these are the 3 signs that he mentions. There is some more signs, but we'll stick to the book inshallah ta'ala as much as possible. Then he says, Faslun, chapter heading on شروط إجزاء الحجر ثمانية. Chapter heading on what are the conditions for us to be able to use istijmar to cleanse ourselves. Istijmar means cleaning yourself with rocks instead of water. Istinja is when you use water to cleanse yourself after using the toilet. Istijmar from the word is the usage of hajar, stones, when you're cleansing yourself. What are the conditions in order for it to be correct for you to use rocks to cleanse yourself if you're outside or you're traveling or the likes of these affairs? And the hajar here, in our time, what takes its place is tissues and the likes of it, or leaves and halumma jarra. So what are these signs? He mentions 8 signs. The first is أن يكون بثلاثة أحجار. The first is that it must be done with 3 stones. And in the case of leaves and tissue, likewise 3. They do mention though, if a rock is large enough, not obviously not a boulder or anything, but something that is got enough space to have 3 different sides of it, then they mention this is allowed, as long as you're not going to make your hand najis or the likes. Okay? It's allowed. Likewise, if there is, let's say there's a large tissue roll and you're able to use it twice, 2 clean sides on it, that's fine, and then you get one more for the third. But it has to be 3 wipes. 3 times that you're wiping it to get rid of the najasa. The second is وَأَن يُنْقِيَ الْمَحَلِ, that the area must be cleaned thoroughly, that it cleanses that area properly. If it just smudges a little bit and there's a lot of najasa left, then that does not complete it. You have to be able to clean it thoroughly. Number 3, وَأَلَّا يَجِفَّ النَّجَسِ, that the impurity does not become dry. That the impurity does not become dry on your skin. Meaning that it's taken so long that now it's fully dried. Even if you used to wipe something over it, especially number 2, akramakumullah, feces, then and it's become dry, it's not going to be removed and cleansed and cleaned with these rocks or tissues because it's dried. Which is an indication that a person, once they finish their qada al-haja, they finish their need in the toilet, they need to come out as soon as possible. And it shouldn't be like we have examples of people in the society where they will stay in the toilet and watch a whole movie, for example, in the toilet seat. Tab'an is gonna dry. Okay? So, without need, staying in the toilet extensively. Okay? If these conditions are not met, you're not allowed to do istijmar. You need to use water. So these conditions, if they're not met, you have to use water. Istijmar is you're allowed to do. Even in the presence of water, you're allowed to do istijmar. But if you don't follow these conditions, then you have to use water. Is that clear? So number 3 is it cannot become dry. Number 4, وَلَا يَنْتَقِلْ, that the impurity does not move from its place to somewhere else. So let's say it moves from the place that it exits and it came on, like it touched another part of your skin, on your legs or the likes, then you have to use water. Number 5, وَلَا يَطْرَى عَلَيْهِ آخَرْ, that another impurity does not go on top of that impurity. That a person, if they urine in the toilet, and then let's say, akramakumullah, they land one there, and the urine splashes on them, on their body. This is now impurity going on top of that impurity. You're not allowed to use istijmar anymore. You have to use water. So, وَأَلَّا يَطْرَى عَلَيْهِ آخَرْ. Number 6, وَلَا يُجَاوِزُ صَفْحَتَهُ وَحَشَفَتَهُ, that it does not go beyond the outer area of a person's, akramakumullah, may Allah honor you guys, from a person's buttock, cheek, and that area where it's normally supposed to be, that it does not leave that area and spread. The next one, he says, وَلَا يُصِيبَهُ مَاءٌ, that water does not touch it. We said here, this is when you have the availability of water, but you instead use istijmar. It's allowed to use istijmar. But then let's say water came on top of it. Can you just continue with istijmar? La. Now you have to use water. Okay? So if anything liquidy touches it, then you have to use water. طيب. Lastly, وَأَنْ يَكُونَ الْأَحْجَارُ طَاهِرَةً, these rocks that you are using, or these tissues that you are using, or anything that is similar to it, has to be clean. It can't be something that is impure already. You can't use something that is already impure, like dung, which is the feces of an animal that's become hard, which is sometimes could be mistaken for a rock, but it's not. So this is not allowed to use. And they also mention anything that is muhtaram, anything that is consumable and something that is respected, like food. You're not allowed to use food to cleanse yourself from najasa. طيب, any questions? No questions.
Does the also apply for number 1 as well? And
say again?
the use of the rocks, does that apply to number 1 as well?
No. So the question is, does that apply to number 1 as well as qada al-hajj generally? So both 1 and 2.
You know, if the food is gone off, like the bread's gone really stale, it's going to be thrown away. Do you use it then?
For?
Istimam?
No. Because now there's the alim of the jinn. And the Prophet ﷺ, he prohibited us from using bones of a chicken or an animal, the meat of it, after the meat's finished. That the bone you shouldn't even use. Why? Because it's food of your brothers from the jinn.
It mentions in the conditions for using a stone, but should it still be preferred to use water?
Ahsant. So the ulama, they say it's allowed. You can choose this or that. But what's best? They say water is best. Okay?
You know, for the signs of purity, there's only one sign has to be present or multiple.
Ahsant, very good. We skipped that. Jazakallah khair for bringing us back. Any one of these signs appear, specifically the last 2, then the person has reached adulthood. But if the last 2 signs have not appeared, wet dream or hayd for the women, menstruation, that has not appeared up until they reached 15 years old. They haven't had none of these signs. Up until 15. Maybe let's say up until 16. Have they reached adulthood? 16 is too late. He's already here at 15. Even if the other signs, لم يأتي عليه. So all these signs are signs beforehand. And if none of them appear, 15 is the threshold. Even if no other signs came, 15 is the threshold that the person's adult.
So if any sign has appeared
Before 15, this is the 2 that we're looking at. Hayd or wet dream. This is before 15. So from 9 to 15. If they haven't, both of them. So if they haven't come up until 15, even if the signs haven't come, khalas, you've reached the threshold. 15 is the cut-off point. Now you're an adult. Is that clear?
that's the wet dream and the menstruation.
No. Okay, anything else? Okay. طيب. فصل فروض الوضوء 6. The obligations of wudu are 6. He says number 1 الأول النية الثاني غسل الوجه الثالث غسل اليدين مع المرفقين الرابع مسح شيء من الرأس الخامس غسل الرجلين مع الكعبين السادس الترتيب. He mentions here the 6 things that are obligatory for us to cover in order for our wudu to be correct. Without these 6 things, your wudu is invalid and batil. Number 1, that you have to have the intention. Intention that you are making wudu. The difference between a person doing the actions of wudu because it's hot outside and it's summer and he automatically just starts washing his hands, his face. If you was to ask him, what are you doing? Are you doing wudu? He says, no, I'm just cooling down. What was the difference between him and someone actually doing wudu? The intention. He never intended, he intended. So number 1, you have to have the intention. Number 2, غسل الوجه, the washing of the face. وغسل الوجه includes all of the face, starting from the top of your forehead up until the bottom of your chin. And if you have a beard, you have to do takhleel of it. And then from the ear, next to the ear, to the other side of the ear. So all of that is the face. It has to be covered in your washing. Number 3, غسل اليدين مع المرفقين, the washing of the hands, the arms, up until the elbows. And that includes from the top of your wrist, or from the top of your fingertips, from the top of your fingertips up until your elbows, including your elbows. You have to wash this. This is obligatory. The next is مسح شيء من الرأس, that you wipe a part of your head, something from your head. This is obligatory. Okay? So if a person wipes just the top, then this is sufficient. Or the bottom, then this is sufficient for the obligation for the person's wudu to be correct. The next, al-khamis, he says غسل الرجلين مع الكعبين, that a person washes their feet, including the up until their ankles. And the sadis at-tartib, following that order. You have to wash your face, then your arms, then wipe your head, then your feet. And if you change that tartib, then your wudu is invalid. And thereafter, if you prayed with that wudu, your salah is invalid. And if you know, you have to repeat it. As for a person who is ignorant, then this is a difference. But a person's wudu is invalid without that. So this is the basic for the obligation. As for the sunnah and that which is more perfect, then they mention it later on. Okay?
Autopilot, just do a habit, wudu without the intention.
Yeah.
Would you have to redo you?
So that it depends on the person's intention. Even if it's autopilot, but they have the niyyah that whenever, it's like some of the Sahaba do, whenever they use the toilet, they will make wudu. That's fine. That's not the problem. The main thing is you ask that person, what are you doing? If you stop him right there, what are you doing? If you're driving the car in a motorway and someone stops you in the middle of the motorway and they say, where are you going? Do you say, I don't know? You know, sah? That's your intention, akhi. If someone stops you in the middle of the action, you know what you're doing or what you're doing it for. Okay? Anything else? Last question.
It doesn't mention number of times.
Yeah. So this is the basic. So the basic is just one. Everything else is sunnah. Okay? طيب. I'm trying to hold myself back. I'm saying more because the kutub al-fiqh is a curriculum. And a curriculum purposely mentions certain information in order for you to gradually... This stuff, you need to be memorizing it. Because they're purposely يختصرون, they summarize it and make it as easy as possible. But then once you finish this level, you go to a higher book. They're going to give you more information. Then you go to a third level, and they're going to start mentioning difference of opinions. وهكذا. So right now, we're just going to take it as it is and go... If you have an issue with understanding certain parts, or maybe it goes against something else in the book that's mentioned, then mention it. But if it's something that is extra, it might come in the next chapter, or it might come in the next book. طيب? There's a reason why they do this. Okay. If I was to mention everything that I know to you now, and it goes over your head, this basic stuff is going to go over your head, and the extra information, all of it is going to get lost. The point is not that you mention as much knowledge as you can in one go, or to show off, or la. The point is that you take that which is beneficial to you. قليلا اليوم شيئا وغدا مثله من نخب العلم التي تلتقد يحصل المرء بها حكمة وإنما السيل اجتماع النقد. Today a little bit, tomorrow some more, from the pieces of wisdoms that you can pick up. By way of it, you become wise. وَإِنَّمَا السَّيْلُ, that stream, that ocean is only a collection of drops. One drop. Imam al-Zuhri, Imam of Imam Malik, the teacher of the teachers. He had thousands of ahadith under his belt, memorized. They asked him, how did you reach this level? He goes, إِنَّمَا حَفِظْنَا الْحَدِيثَ بِالْحَدِيثِ وَالْحَدِيثَيْن. We memorized by one hadith, two hadiths. One today, tomorrow another one. وهكذا it adds up. Okay? So we need to train ourselves to not overload, especially in this day and age that we live in of you have easy accessibility to information and knowledge, but there is no quality of that. Nothing sticks. طيب. النية, he mentions here a chapter on intentions and tartib. So he mentioned the first thing is the intention that you have to have, and the last thing is you have to follow that order. So he mentions here something on that regard. He says, النية قصد الشيء مقترنا بفعله. The niyyah intention is that a person intends something whilst he's performing that action. So you have that intention, then you perform the action straight after it. وَمَحَلُّهَا الْقَلْبِ. Its place, the intention, its place is where? It's in the heart, he says. وَالتَّلَفُّظُ بِهَا سُنَّةٌ. He says here, verbalizing it is sunnah. Here is a waqfa. Whenever there is something that I want to make a correction or tanbih on, I will mention it. And I will try to do as little as possible, but whenever there are a few places, I will mention it. Imam al-Shafi'i, he says explicitly that the intention is in the heart and you do not need to verbalize it. This is what Imam al-Shafi'i said. That the intention is in the heart and you do not need to verbalize it with your tongue. This is explicitly mentioned by Imam al-Shafi'i. The direct students of Imam al-Shafi'i, Imam Muzani, and others from the direct students of Imam al-Shafi'i, none of them mention the affair of verbalizing it on the tongue. They only mention that the intention is in the heart. Mukhtasar of Imam Muzani, all of the earlier scholars that came on. The first 5 centuries, none of them even discussed the topic of verbalizing on the tongue because there was no need. Everyone knew that it was in the heart. In the 5th century, one of the scholars of the madhhab of Imam Shafi'i is the first to mention it. And he came in the 5th century. طيب. Following on that, from that, in the 9th century and the 10th century, Ibn Hajar al-Haytami and al-Rafi'i and others from prominent scholars that came later on, all of them, the latter ones, all of them mentioned the affair of verbalizing the tongue. Why? One of the answers that they give is, and the way they say it is, it's mainly for someone that is struggling to make the intention. To help them, they would verbalize it. So they're not even saying it's something that is in the Quran or the Sunnah or something that everyone has. They're saying it's something that will help the person that is struggling to do it. But it only came with the latter scholars of the madhhab of Imam Shafi'i. All of the latter ones, and he is from the latter scholars. He died in the year 1270, so this is the 13th century. All of the latter scholars, they mention it. But the earlier scholars, even Abu Shuja', that has the famous book Masnad Abu Shuja', he doesn't mention it. So for that case, we say the reality of the affair is verbalizing on the tongue is not sunnah. That's the reality. In the madhhab, from the earlier scholars, from Imam Shafi'i himself and the earlier students, and it only came later on into the madhhab. The first person to say it was in the 5th century, and then the latter scholars followed it. And there is nothing from the Sunnah, from the Prophet ﷺ, nor from the Sahaba, nor from the Athar that mention it. So in that regard, talaffuz, verbalizing it, is not Sunnah. Okay? طيب. Then he says, وَوَقْتُهَا, its time is عند غسل أول جزء من الوجه. Its time is that a person does it. Obviously, he's talking about verbalizing, so he mentioned what time to mention it. طيب. Next part, وَالتَّرْتِيب, the following of the order of that in the wudu. He says, أَلَّا يُقَدَّمَ عُضْوٌ عَلَى عُضْوٌ. What does the tartib mean? Is that you follow, that you don't give precedence to washing one part or one body limb that you're supposed to wash or wipe before another. So you don't wipe your head before the washing of your face. Rather, you wash your face first, then you wipe your head. You don't wash your feet first and then wash your head, arms, and then finish it with wiping of the head. La, you have to follow the order. If you give precedence to one over the other, then your wudu is batil.
They give for verbalizing the niyas to help people.
Some of them mention that specifically to help in making their intention if they're struggling, like old age or the likes. It's in the heart, and you don't need to say on the tongue. It's not a requirement. Yes, it's in I believe it's in al-Um. We'll go for another 10 minutes, inshallah ta'ala. He says, فَصْلٌ فِي أَحْكَامِ الْمَاءِ. He says, chapter heading on the rulings of to do with water. He says, الْمَاءُ قَلِيلٌ وَكَثِيرٌ. Water is 2 types. Either it is a lot or it is a little. When is it a lot? When is it a little? He says, فَالْقَلِيلُ مَا دُونَ الْقُلَّتَيْنِ وَالْكَثِيرُ قُلَّتَانِ فَأَكْثَرُ. Little is anything that is below qullatayn. We're going to come back to what qullatayn is. Little is anything less than qullatayn. And kathir, a lot, is anything above qullatayn. Now what is qullatayn? Qullatayn roughly is 190 liters. Roughly 190 liters. So if there's water, the amount of 190 liters or above 200, 230, 300, then this is fawqa qullatayn, is considered a lot of water. And if it's less, 150, a bathtub, the likes of these affairs, then this is considered qaleel, ma'un qaleel. Why is it important? He says, القليل يتنجس بوقوع النجاسة فيه وإن لم يتغير. The water that is considered little, less than qullatayn, the mere mixing of najasa, impurity with it, then that water becomes impure. Because that water is little. Anything below the qullatayn, if the water mixes with it, then that water is impure. We're not allowed to use it for purification, for wudu and the likes of these affairs. وَإِن لَمْ يَتَغَيَّرْ, even if that water hasn't changed in color, taste or smell. If a person urinates in that little water, then that water is impure, we're not allowed to use it, even if, let's say, the color never changed, or the smell never changed, or the taste never changed. It doesn't matter, because it's little. The opposite is true. Al-ma'ul kathir, the water that is fawq al-qullatayn, more than 190 liters, then even if a person, if impurity mixes with it, then it continues to be pure unless the color changes, the smell changes, or the taste changes. If these three sifat change, then that water that is Allah becomes impure. If it doesn't change, then it is still pure. The Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned that anything فوق القلتين لم يحمل الخبث, it does not carry khabath. And in another hadith, it mentions as long as it doesn't change those three awsaf, the color, taste and smell. Is that clear? So little water, large water. Little water is mixed with impurity, automatically impure. Large water, it depends. It's mixed with impurity, but did it change color, taste or smell? No, it's still pure. Yes, now it's impure. So we have, for example, the canals or the rivers or the likes of these affairs, reservoir. It's more than 190 liters. If one person was to urinate in it, but it never changed color, smell, taste, it is still pure. If it changes, then it is impure. Depends. Did the color, taste, smell change? And is it a lot of water? If it's a little water, it's impure. If it's a lot of water, like the Atlantic Sea, what harm is that urine going to do? It's going to clean itself. واضح?
So could you make wudu with Pepsi or?
No. So this is different. The water has to be water. Water, transparent, the water that we know, with the H2O, right? If it mixes with anything else, then it's not. Pepsi, do you call it water? No. The name changed, صح? So it's not water anymore. It has to be water. Okay.
I heard the water has to flow down your elbows and stuff like that. Is that true?
Ahsant. So the question is, does the water have to flow when you're washing? Look, the difference between washing and wiping, and which is an important question. The difference between washing and wiping is, washing is that the sign that you are washing is that the water flows from you, that it drips. And the sign that that you're wiping is that if you was to wipe, that water's not going to drip from you. When you wipe your head, does the water drip from you? It's coming down like this. That's washing now. It shouldn't be dripping in just like the way you wash. So the difference is so let's say you're using the tap. If you have both hands, you get the water, don't let go of the water, that's washing. So wash my face, I wash my arms, I don't let go of the water. But wiping is, I get the water, I let go of the water. Whatever's left, I wipe. Wipe my feet, that's wiping. So if I wash, it's going to naturally drip and flow. And if I wipe, it shouldn't. طيب. Any other questions? Inshallah, we do Masna bi Shuja' after. Well, you're going to be all Shafi'is, yeah?
Can you work with the term in Shafi'i?
It's going to come, inshallah. Any questions that's going to come, we're not going to... Tell them.
Just to go back, in the Shafi'i Fiqh, is there any precedent given to the growth of hairs for maturity? Or is it just those two conditions?
This book right now, it only mentions those. But there are, in the future books, they will mention more signs for maturity. Okay, so I'll mention it anyway because it's khafif, and this is the question and answer session, but I'm trying to hold myself back. The growing of pubic hair is another sign of adulthood. for both male and female. It doesn't mention it here, they mention it in other books. The growing of pubic hair. So these signs before 15-year-old, then they become adult. If none of those signs come, then 15-year-old is the thresh and they automatically become adult. 15 lunar years. Okay? طيب, a sister asks, أحسن الله إليكم وإليكم, do we wash our hands before we wipe our heads? Now, do we wash our hands before we wipe our heads or just use leftover water? La, you have to get new water. So you can't wash your, first you wash your face and then you wash your arms and then whatever's left, you just say, I want to wipe over it. La, you have to get new water for it. You have to get new water for it. طيب. Look, the madhhab, the good thing about studying a madhhab is as I said, you take it as a curriculum. It helps you understand fiqh from nothing to something. You go from this basic book which just gives you small pieces of information in different abwab. You memorize it, you act upon it. Try to memorize it as much as possible. Even if you don't actually memorize it, try to repeat it so you're so familiar with it. Read your book, revise these chapters that you've done throughout the week. Every day, try to pick up every day and just revise. Even though you know it, just have a read of it again. Have a read of it again. Why? It will become like memorization. By the time you get to the next book, that information that you had, the same information is going to come in the next book, but then it's going to add extra information, extra conditions, extra things that he didn't mention in this book. Now you just have to memorize what? Those extra bits. And you glue it together. Then you go to the third book. Now there's going to be differences of opinions in the madhhab. In the madhhab they say this and they say this. So which one is it? And they talk about it. Then they go to a higher level, which is now they discuss the evidences. But why did he say it's sunnah and he said no, actually it's not sunnah? He had this evidence here. Okay, which one's stronger? Why did they? Now you're actually going into the evidences that they had. Then you go to a higher level. You exit from the madhhab, this one madhhab that you were studying for so long. Then you go to the higher level of comparative fiqh. You look at all four madhahib. You look at the evidences and compare all four of them. What did they say? This one said this is halal, this is haram, this is sunnah, this is makruh, for example. Why did they differ? This one has evidence, this one has evidence, this one, he didn't find anything, but he has his own way of understanding it. These two, they had the same evidences, but they understood it differently. Now you have to compare what was the illah behind it. Which one is rajih, marjuh? How can we bring it together? That's the highest level you get to. And then after that, if a person continues in that bab and Allah gives them tawfiq, then that's the level of ijtihad. That many scholars, they would start off with a madhhab, and then by the end of it, they would be considered a mujtahid, someone that reaches their own conclusion. They go to the evidences from the Quran and Sunnah directly, extrapolate the evidences and extrapolate ahkam and rulings from it. Shaykh Islam ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Qayyim, they started upon the Hanbali madhhab. But then at the end, you couldn't really say he was a fully Hanbali anymore because he's higher than that now. وهكذا. Is that clear? That's the benefit of the curriculum, the madhhab. So لا نتعصب, we don't become staunch followers of the madhhab in terms of if you can't exit it. And if you exit it, you are a opposer and you are this and you are that. لا. You have maths, you want to learn maths, you have two curriculums, صح? You have AQA, you have edXL. طيب, you learn edXL, خير وبركة. You learn AQA, خير وبركة. Don't be in edXL and say anyone that exits edXL, then they are ضال مضل, and I will never speak to them again. It's a curriculum to learn maths. This is a curriculum, this madhhab to learn fiqh, both of them. طيب, you can exit sometimes. Maybe this one has better method in this. Maybe this one has a better categorization. وهكذا. طيب.
Is it okay for you, for example, if you grew up on the Hanafi madhhab, but you gradually want to shift to the Shafi'i madhhab, that maybe on some matters like for salah and wudu you follow the Hanafi madhhab, but for some you follow the Shafi'i madhhab, so gradually making a shift?
Generally it's fine, there's no problem with it. It's a curriculum at the end of the day. It's just now on the topic of what's the best madhhab that you should start with. طبعا we're in the UK, you're a cocktail, you can follow whatever you want. But generally speaking, most Muslim countries, they have, or lands, they have a majority madhhab, usually. So it's not encouraged, that the ulama, they don't encourage that you go against the madhhab of your city generally, your country, your land. Why? Everyone is praying upon the way of the Shafi'i madhhab, and you are studying and teaching Maliki. Why? You're always going to hit heads with the people. It's better to study the madhhab, and from that madhhab maybe correct things and stuff like that, no problem. So any madhhab that you're on is fine. In UK you can't really say that unless you live, let's say, in a, you live in a city and it's all Hanafi, then maybe yeah. But like in generally like like London, Birmingham, the big cities,
I'd say Birmingham is a Hanafi city, so let's
Hanafi. Allah ya akhi. We're going to make Shafi'i come up now. طيب. I think there's one last question. Is it okay to wash your hands after wudu? There's no problem. And for the sunan of wudu and stuff, we're going to talk about that after, inshallah ta'ala. We'll end with that. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك وبالله توفيق.